This slideshow is going to focus on the author's purpose, tone, and audience. Now, in a previous model, we did discuss purpose. That was more your purpose for reading as a critical reader. This slideshow is focusing on the author's purpose, so trying to determine why the author wrote the piece in the first place. And then that will lead us directly into who they wrote the piece for, which is the audience. Okay, so as a critical reader, you want to question why the author wrote the particular piece that you are reading. What was their reasoning? What was their purpose? Are they trying to give you information? So if you were reading a set of directions, you would know that this author is writing the directions so you can find your way somewhere. Okay, is the author trying to teach you something? So as you're reading through our textbook, the purpose of our textbook is for you to learn. So that author wrote in a manner to try and teach you the most information. Is the author trying to sell you something? If you're watching a commercial or you're reading a print advertisement or you're reading a billboard, you know the author is trying to sell you something. Are they trying to entertain you or provide thought-provoking insight? So if you're reading a book such as The Alchemist or any other type of book or comic book, then you're just getting entertainment, and that's important as well. Or is the author trying to persuade you, trying to change your thinking, trying to make you do something? So again, this is within arguments and advertisements, but even the book we're reading in our course, Effortless Healing, this author is trying to persuade you. You know, Dr. Mercola in our book is trying to change your thinking. He is trying to tell you the healthiest way to live. So his purpose is for you to change, and maybe another secondary purpose is for him to persuade you to buy things, buy some of his products. So as you are reading anything, always think about what is the author's purpose? Why did they write this? Now, once you understand why the piece was written, then the second portion is to determine who this was written for. So who is the audience? You know, who is the author trying to instruct or entertain or persuade or teach? And when determining the audience, you want to think very specifically, what age group is this? Is this for a particular gender? Is this for a particular socioeconomic status or education level? Is this written for a particular demographic or someone who has certain hobbies or even values? So when thinking about the audience, you want to think more than just old and young. You want to think specifically. So for example, when J.K. Rowling wrote the Harry Potter series, you know, she wrote these books for children and young teenagers, even though all ages enjoyed it, and it ended up being, you know, a very popular set of books for everyone. As she was writing it, her target audience was technically children and young teenagers. So, if you are going to do a little practice here within who is the audience for these four types of writing, okay, who do you think the textbook used in our course is written for? If you were to read an article about the need to rescue pets from shelters, who is the audience for this? An article about taking supplements to increase joint mobility, or a research study determining whether or not social media contributes to body dysmorphia in teenage girls. So take a minute here and just think, who would be the audience for this particular type of writing? Make a guess. And then on this next slide, we'll see if you're correct. Of course, the textbooks used in our course are students enrolled in this particular college course. An article about the need to rescue pets from shelters would be pet lovers, people who love pets. An article about supplements, older adults, you could even say maybe those that are 65 and up. You could say both men and women concerned with mobility, all demographics, all socioeconomic statuses. The research study determining whether or not social media contributes to body dysmorphia, that audience would be a bit more specific in that it would probably be the parents of teenage girls and or teenage girls themselves, or maybe the teachers of teenage girls would be interested in learning more about this. So, as you can see, the audience for these two is more general. The audience for this one gets a little more specific, and the audience for this one is very specific. Now, with audience and with purpose, which, I'm not going to go into great deal about that because I'm sure you've learned that in many other courses. This is probably just a review. But with that, you also are thinking about and analyzing the tone that the author is using as they are writing their piece. So the author determines why they're writing the piece. They determine who the audience they are writing the piece for. And then they determine how the piece is going to sound or how it is going to feel. So the tone in any piece is the feeling or the mood, the emotional quality of the writing. You know, um, Sometimes this can be difficult to determine in writing. It's really difficult to determine in texting, which is why sometimes there's a lot of miscommunication in text. But in writing, sometimes it's tough to determine what the tone is. And so to help with that, critical thinkers, they look at the connotations in the words. Oops, sorry about that. To try and determine the tone. So we've been discussing connotations from chapter 7. Those are the emotions within words. And that helps us to determine the tone. Now, determining tone is probably easiest in conversation, especially in-person conversation, because you can pick up the tone with gestures and voice and expressions and body language. We don't have that in writing, and we definitely don't have that in texting. And so you have to be really careful with what tone you're picking up. That's why looking at connotations is one of the best ways for determining the tone. And so, as I said again, tone is really difficult in texting. And there was even a Key and Peele skit that we looked at the beginning of the semester that highlighted this very issue. So when you're looking at the tones of writing, these are just some common ways that authors will write. Sometimes they'll write in very informative or impartial ways. Our textbook is written in this tone. It's very instructive, it's informative, it's impartial. Sometimes if you're reading something and it has more of a sincere or a serious feel to it. Sometimes authors write in very reflective or philosophical ways. Certain poetry will have this tone. Sometimes there's just a lot of passion in the writing and you can feel their zealousness for it. Sometimes the tone is just funny and very amusing. Or on the flip side of that, it's sorrowful and mournful, and you can feel that as well. Same with nostalgic, where people are thinking of days of yore and they have that wistfulness about them. Sometimes tones are very complainy or whiny. Sometimes it's even just downright harsh or mean-spirited, or sometimes super sentimental and gushy. So you can pick up those feels, the feel that you get with the writing as you're reading it. And you do that by looking at the word choices and looking at the connotations that are used. Okay, so we're basically going to put the last 3 items that I just discussed all together with pretty much everything we have learned for the entire semester. This slideshow is just kind of adding in the last couple of steps that we need to fully analyze and evaluate an argument, or any piece of writing for that matter. So you can use these 8 steps to analyze a piece, evaluate a piece, and it can be for pretty much any piece of writing that you come across. And these 8 steps are important to know, not just for this course, but for any course in your college career where they ask you to analyze something. So even if it's a history course or a psychology course, I promise you are not going to go wrong if you follow these 8 steps. These 8 steps will give you the exact formula you need for writing a really strong analysis. And it's what we've done all semester. So this is going to be such an easy assignment for you because you should be an old pro at this by this time. Basically, as always, the first thing you do when you look at any piece of writing is determine the issue and the author's conclusion to the issue. And you find and list and analyze the author's reasons. As you're analyzing the reasons, you are explaining and discussing what are the values this author holds? What are the values and reality assumptions? Are there any ethics involved? Is there an ethical school of thought that is guiding the author's writing? Then you explain and discuss the evidence the author is using to persuade you as the reader, if it's a persuasive piece. Are they using observation or experience, or is there research and data that they are throwing in to try and persuade? You also explain and discuss, the techniques the author is using, and are there any fallacies that they are using to try and persuade as well? Then again, we bring in the last few things we learned in this slideshow. Describe the author's tone. What words or the connotations of the words is the author using to persuade the readers or give information? And what was the purpose for the writing? And who is the audience? And how does this affect the piece of writing? So, for example, when you think about the book we're reading in our course, Effortless Healing, who is their audience really that Dr. Mercola is focusing on? Is he focusing on mostly young people, mostly old people, kind of middle age? And how does this affect his writing? So you want to kind of think, well, who is Dr. Mercola really focusing on with this book? Who would this book be more, for? Is it for my age, or is it for an older age or a younger age? And that also kind of helps guide your evaluation of it. So after you have done all 7 steps, in any piece of analysis, you always end with a personal evaluation of what you've just read. And this is the best part because this is where you get to finally give your personal opinion and you get to determine whether or not the writing was valid or worthy. Now, with this last piece, I just want to make sure that I note again that it's not just whether or not you liked it or disliked it. You want to focus more on what evidence was presented within this writing to make it valid or worthy. If you just focus it on whether you personally liked it, you're really giving kind of an immature response in that it just focuses on your personal opinion. And you want to kind of go a little bit deeper than that because you are giving your opinion, but you're giving your opinion with evidence, with reasons. So not just, I didn't like it because I didn't like the way the author wrote. Well, that's not good enough. You need to give specific reasons as to what was good or what was not so good about the piece. So kind of think a little larger when you go to give your final evaluation. So with that, your activity is basically using the 8 steps from the previous slide. So you're going to use these 8 steps. As I said, these are the steps you use going forward to analyze any piece of writing here on out. And you're going to find an article on the open web. Just Google search any aspect of the coronavirus. It's not going to be hard to find. Type the title of the article in your source and answer each question from the previous slide. Use those 8 steps. Try and keep it to 3 to 5 sentences per question. And that's it. Okay, that's your last final little piece of analysis for our course. I will keep it on this slide for a bit longer so you can get the full directions. But again, if you're on this slide, that means you're almost done with the course. So congratulations for that.